Good evening and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Anna Kalczyńska. Could the war in Ukraine end even in November? Well, probably, if Ukraine's willing to capitulate. According to Financial Times, under the draft peace plan forged by the US envoy Steve Witkoff together with Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev, Ukraine would be required to cede full control of the Donbas region and halve the size of its armed forces in exchange for a US security guarantee for Ukraine and Europe against future Russian aggression. Nobody knows exactly what that means, but Adjunct Professor of National Security Olena Lennon from the University of New Haven joins me now to discuss, among others, this proposal, which will be presented to Volodymyr Zelenskyy tomorrow. So, good evening and thank you for joining us here on TVP World.
Good evening.
Apparently, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, under pressure both on the battlefield and domestically, is expected to accept the plan prepared by the Americans. Are we facing a potential fait accompli, or this peace plan is dead on arrival?
Indeed, Zelenskyy has found himself in a perfect storm of circumstances, facing domestic pressures, being entrapped in one of the largest corruption scandals in his wartime presidency, implicating one of his close business associates and friends. Resignation and removal of 2 ministers, and yesterday the standoff in parliament demanding that the entire cabinet of ministers should be removed. Now, all of that is happening as Ukraine is entering one of the coldest winter periods, and with its energy infrastructure heavily damaged by continuous Russian airstrikes. And on top of that, now Zelenskyy is also feeling the pressure coming from his Western partners, was this 28-point peace plan that had allegedly been developed behind Zelenskyy's back. So he's under a lot of pressure, and obviously he is trying to regain control of the narrative and try to signal strength and integrity and confidence to the extent possible, and that's why he is currently in Turkey, trying to at least negotiate prisoner exchanges, because I think Zelenskyy is trying to again recover the narrative to where a return of Ukrainian soldiers home could be a welcome gift coming into the holiday season. I think Zelenskyy is seeking a picture of soldiers reuniting with their families during the holiday break.
Indeed, Volodymyr Zelenskyy has a lot on his plate. As you mentioned, he is in Ankara today, trying to, as he put it, accelerate the negotiations and the peace plan to be advanced. Let us have a listen to Volodymyr Zelenskyy and also Recep Tayyip Erdogan. What did they say today after their talk?
In our talks today, we emphasize that the Istanbul process should continue with a pragmatic and results-oriented approach. At a time when the war's exhausting effects for both sides are deepening, I stated that we believe the Istanbul talks represent an important milestone in efforts towards a diplomatic solution. The increasing attacks on energy infrastructure and the loss of life bring with them destruction that is difficult to repair for both sides. We believe it would be beneficial to reactivate the Istanbul process with a more comprehensive content that addresses the problems that have now become acute. We expect all our partners who desire the bloodshed in the region to stop to adopt a constructive approach toward the Istanbul process. We count on the strength of Turkish diplomacy, on its clarity in Moscow. The active involvement of Turkey in the coalition of willing states is important, especially in the military-maritime component.
So indeed, it was the Turkish side which first spoke of a possibility of ending the war as soon as this November, right? So it seems as right now there's actually a free choice in which only one thing is actually offered. Russian position remains maximalist. They make no concessions. So do you see this an American administration growing impatient and wanting to see some progress, likely at Ukraine's expense?
Well, the Americans definitely want to see progress, and I think Trump has been quite frustrated and humiliated by Putin this year in his first year of second presidency. That said, though, it's still unclear what the U.S.'s position or approach exactly is, as at the same time, they have just allowed Ukrainians to use long-range ATACMS, American-made ATACMS, these ballistic missiles that can reach far beyond the front lines, deep into Russia's territory. So this is quite a development. President Biden, former President Biden, was the first president to allow Ukrainians to use ATACMS at the end of 2024, but then Trump put that permission quickly on hold and lifted that hold recently, also signaling that Trump is not giving up on putting more military pressure on the battlefield, and increasing the costs on Russia. Now, in combination with recent sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, Russia's two largest oil companies, I think that the US administration is trying to balance diplomatic, economic, and military pressure. So I don't necessarily see how Ukraine can be pressured into capitulation here, because at the same time, they're actually militarily, Americans are equipping Ukraine to the extent to where we're giving them extended permissions to where they can now hit far behind Russian lines and strike critical logistics and infrastructure targets.
Right.
So all of that is expected to put additional pressure on Putin, who will be expected not just show up at negotiations, but also make some, significant concessions.
Right, but if I may jump in, one of the point of this 28 points or pages plan requires from the Ukrainian to give away some of their weaponry. So that doesn't make sense, right? How viable would this news be, given that, as you mentioned, U.S. have sent Kiev the ATACMS and was on the brink of giving them the Patriot systems as well?
Right. There's currently, like you said, an offer or additional funding that the Europeans are actually going to foot to provide more components and then maintenance and training assistance on Patriot systems, including more missiles themselves. Ukraine needs at least 20 more of these, according to Zelenskyy, of the Patriot system. So the new batch of Patriots is supposed to be more advanced and more effective at air defense that obviously Ukrainians, given the escalation of airstrikes, urgently need right now. So again, given all the parallel dynamics of new Patriot systems and maintenance support, ATACMS, I think I don't see how this is going to change the military balance into Russia's favor necessarily, to where Ukraine would have any incentive to capitulate. I think this is another attempt at the U.S. administration kind of showing leverage and their peacemaking ambitions. But in the end, I'm afraid that another attempt at negotiations in which Ukraine will be expected to capitulate is just going to drag time and buy Russia more time to continue doing what they have been doing, especially going into the winter. Unfortunately, I remain quite pessimistic about the real prospects of peace, in which Russia doesn't have any incentives to make any significant concessions.
Right, and who is more pressured to talk right now, Ukraine or Russia? On one hand, Ukraine is being shelled by Russia and loses on the battlefield in Pokrovsk, for instance, but Kremlin feels the results of the sanction, that's one thing. On the other hand, has huge losses and economic problems. So Zelenskyy is weakened by the corruption scandal in his government. The timing isn't best for him, definitely. So what are Zelenskyy's options if the Americans put on pressure on him tomorrow?
You're right. Zelenskyy is under a lot of pressure right now, most of it coming from an increasingly impatient Ukrainian population that has been just completely shocked by this new corruption scandal in the energy sector, no less. as Ukrainians are dealing with daily shutdowns and blackouts. So I think that all things considered, Ukraine is definitely under a lot more pressure, but not to a point where Zelenskyy would be willing to surrender any territories. I think that is a red line at the moment, and going forward as well. Now, that said, Russia obviously has been under a lot of pressure given new sanctions and military aid to Ukraine and now long-range ATACMS. But the Russians have shown an ability to adapt and outmaneuver Trump to buy more time and recover from any sort of additional costs that had been imposed on them. So again, unfortunately, I'm quite pessimistic in this resulting any significant breakthroughs. The one positive that I do see as a potential outcome is one of the largest prisoner of war exchanges. Zelenskyy is now negotiating 1,200 soldiers returning home. I think that is plausible, and it would be at least a diplomatic win for Zelenskyy, and will allow him to regain control of the narrative at home.
And how about the Europeans not being consulted? This is something that we heard also from Financial Times. One of the representatives of the US government said, we are not interested what the Europeans have to say. What is interesting to us is only the position of Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Ukraine has to agree for that. So if the plan is being communicated to the European allies, is there going to be a common stance on that? And who could speak on behalf of the Europeans?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, the Europeans, like you said, they're not quite united. At the end of the day, foreign and defense policy is a realm of, national policy. So each country has to also, look out for their own national interest. France now is positioned to lead. France and Germany are positioned to lead, I would say, the most. But at the end of the day, Europeans don't have a choice. Regardless of how the Trump administration approaches it, and it remains unpredictable and creative in a way. Europeans also need to be using every time all these sort of delays and decisions to build up their defense production, to scale up their ammunition production, and continue using this time to improve their own defenses.
Despite the enigmatic promise of U.S. guarantees for Europe, as we hear from this plan.
Right. I think the U.S. will always be a partner. It will always be providing logistical and intelligence support, reinforcement support. But Europeans cannot rely on the U.S., cannot outsource their security entirely to the U.S. Those times are gone. I think that much is clear, and that much was clear 10 years ago. So again, the Europeans now can only count on all of these negotiations and talks and back and forth, buying them time to allocate resources accordingly, especially now that the Russians have shown ability to enter European airspace undetected and unconfronted. So I think Europeans would be wise to also use these talks as an important time to build up their defenses.
Professor, thank you so much. Olena Lennon, Adjunct Professor of National Security, University of New Haven. Thank you so much for joining us here on TVP World, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more to come. The news coverage continues.